A few years ago, I created a video discussing whether you should let your chickens free range. When I first thought about it, I imagined an open space, perfect for chickens to roam, with lots of shade, fresh ground to explore, and plenty of delicious greenery. Chickens love eating fresh plants, and leafy greens are really good for them. I envisioned that with such a space, the chickens would thrive and grow healthy, enjoying the abundance of natural food around them. However, when we moved from our large property to a smaller suburban lot, I quickly realized that free-ranging chickens wasn't an option. Not only would it be against the town's rules, but I also worried that they would end up on the road, get attacked by a dog, or worse, become someone's dinner. The potential dangers made me rethink the idea entirely, and I knew I had to find another way to give them a safe and enjoyable environment. Despite this, I still wanted my chickens to enjoy scratching the ground for bugs, nibbling on fresh greenery, and having some shade when they needed it. So, I created a setup where they could scratch through the loose mulch in their enclosed run. I frequently add fresh mulch, and as they work, they uncover all sorts of interesting little treats. This helps keep them engaged and provides essential nutrients that they might not get otherwise. I recently did a video explaining how I cycle mulch through my chicken run into my garden. It's been a great way to keep the soil in the garden healthy, and my chickens get plenty of fresh, leafy plants from there. They love it, and I'm sure the extra vitamins are helping them stay healthy. But I've noticed that they seem to prefer pecking at plants that are still growing, rather than ones I pick for them, even if they've just been picked. It's fascinating to watch how they interact with their environment. Over the past few years, I've tried various ways to simulate free-range conditions for my chickens. I'd like to share my experiences with you and what I've learned. Surrounding my enclosed run, I have a fenced-off area I call their range. It's shaped like an L, with 5 small trees and about 60 square meters of space for them to explore. Although the area isn't huge, it's a great space for them to roam around, and it gives me a chance to watch them as they go about their daily activities. This area runs along the shady side of our boundary fence, so it doesn't interfere with my vegetable garden. It's the perfect spot because I can still enjoy watching my chickens explore and interact with the environment without worrying about them disrupting my plants. Over time, I've noticed how much they love scratching and pecking around the area, and it brings me joy to see them so engaged. At first, when my first 3 chickens were just chicks, they stayed confined in their run, as they were too small and inexperienced to venture out on their own. I didn't want to risk them getting into trouble, so I kept them safely within their designated area. During that time, I scattered wheat, barley, and clover seeds around what would eventually become their range. My idea was to use it like break feeding for livestock, giving them access to one part, then rotating them back once the vegetation had regrown. The plants grew fast, and before long, they were lush and thick. It felt like the perfect solution. Let them enjoy the fresh growth and give the plants time to recover. Watching the seeds sprout into full-grown plants was so satisfying, and the chickens absolutely loved it. They seemed to instinctively know when it was time to move to a fresh patch of land, so I made sure to rotate them often to keep their environment interesting and healthy. Oh, and I also decided to plant some pumpkins, because, well, my garden tends to spread out everywhere during the summer. The pumpkins grew quickly and spread their vines all over the place. It wasn't part of my original plan, but I figured it would be a fun addition for the chickens to forage around. When my chickens turned 8 months old, I opened their run to the range area. I initially set up a small temporary fence, about 2 or 3 square meters just outside the door of their run. This gave them a safe way to explore without the risk of running off into the unknown. It was a careful and controlled way to ease them into their new space. For the first few days, they stayed inside, pecking at the lush greenery just beyond the door. They were curious but hesitant at first, unsure of the new area outside their familiar run. But after a while, they ventured out one by one and discovered they could get back in safely, and that's when the real fun began. It was such a rewarding experience to watch them explore beyond their usual confines. This is a couple of weeks later, and even with only 3 chickens, the vegetation is still green, but you can see they've already made a significant dent in the plants. The greenery was beginning to thin out as they did their job of foraging. I began to extend their access further into the larger part of the range. As they became more comfortable, I realized I could trust them to explore the space more freely. Some areas weren't as lush because there was still quite a bit of gravel where I had laid the foundation for the hen house. But over time, the chickens would go wherever the plants were thickest, pecking at whatever caught their eye. A month later, there was hardly any greenery left in the area they had frequented the most, so I decided it was time to extend their range even more. With the area so well used, it became clear that I needed to provide them with more space to roam and forage. At this point, I had more chicks wanting to try the fresh plants, so they got the first chance to peck under the plum trees. A month later, you can see how much the clover had been eaten down where they had access, and it was clear that they were really enjoying the new space. 2 months later, the vegetation was nearly gone, as the chickens quickly devoured everything. It was amazing how quickly they adapted to the range, and they didn't waste any time enjoying their newfound freedom. I kept expanding the range using plastic netting, but the chickens soon pushed through or climbed over to reach the best spots. They were determined to explore every inch of their space, and nothing was off limits. Eventually, I upgraded to sturdy plastic-coated metal fencing to keep them contained. It was a necessary step as they had grown stronger and more adventurous, which meant they needed a more secure boundary to keep them safe while still allowing them plenty of room to roam. I created a small pecking garden and planted edible flowers and leaves around the netting. The chickens loved the new additions, and everything except areas behind the netting was thoroughly eaten or scratched up. It was interesting to see them interact with the new plants, pecking at the flowers and digging around the leaves. They clearly enjoyed the variety and the fresh treats, and it helped keep them engaged and happy. Within 8 months, the chickens had cleared 60 square meters of lush vegetation. My original plan to replant sections didn't work as they ate everything too quickly, but I learned a lot from the process. Despite this, the heavier netting around the pecking gardens kept them intact, providing fresh treats for the chickens after 2 months. It was clear that my chickens had a strong preference for fresh plants, and the system was working, even if it didn't go exactly as planned. Did you know nasturtium seeds taste like capers? The chickens enjoyed them, along with the beautiful flowers, and it was nice to see them excited about the new flavors. By the following summer, the older chickens had started bossing the younger ones around, establishing a clear pecking order in the flock. It was fascinating to watch the dynamics change as the flock grew, and I could see how their personalities were developing, with some chickens clearly more dominant than others. After a full year, I decided to replace the plants along the edges of the range. I let some of my lettuces go to seed, raised the seedlings, and planted them in a newly enclosed section of the range. It was a fresh start, with new green plants for the chickens to enjoy. Watching the seedlings grow was a rewarding experience, as I could already imagine how much the chickens would enjoy the new vegetation once it matured. The baby seedlings were just out of their reach for a while, but they soon grew tall enough to be within pecking distance. Some chickens, like Pia, had no trouble reaching through the netting, but I made sure to adjust it to a vertical position so no one tried to climb. It was fascinating to see how quickly they figured out how to get at the plants, and their persistence always made me smile as they figured out new ways to get what they wanted. What have I learned through all this? Chickens really love to peck at living plants, so providing fresh, growing vegetation is much better than offering them picked leaves. However, small, free-range areas just don't work well. The chickens will destroy the plants too quickly, leaving you with little to no greenery after only a short time. It's important to balance their enjoyment of fresh plants with a system that can allow the plants to regenerate and grow back. If you let them peck without scratching up the roots, though, it works much better. And sturdy, vertical fences are key. They can withstand the chickens' weight and keep them contained. I've found that metal fences are much better than sloping ones, as the sloped ones can be easier for them to escape from. The vertical fences give the chickens enough space to roam freely while preventing them from escaping into areas they shouldn't be. Now that spring has arrived, I'm raising another batch of seedlings to plant along the edges of their range. Meanwhile, I continue picking fresh greens from my garden to give them. I hope this video helps you come up with ways to provide fresh, growing plants for your chickens. Growing fresh plants for your chickens can be a fun and rewarding process, and it's something you can enjoy alongside the chickens as you watch them thrive. Free-ranging doesn't work for everyone for various reasons, but I've found ways to give my chickens the tasty greens they love. Even if free-ranging isn't an option for you, your chickens can still be happy with a small, carefully managed pecking garden like mine. Thanks for watching. It's all about finding what works for your flock, and I'm happy to share my experiences in hopes that it helps you with your own chickens.